Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or listening through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever discovered. These tools are available through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Rice on the website at whyagain.org. These tools are available absolutely free at that website. If you go to that site and click on the red and white bullseye, or the link in the upper left-hand corner of most pages that says Start Here, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of that book provides a narrative description of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. It's a tool I've been using for great effect over the past 17 plus years to improve the quality of my life and relationships and turn any negative emotional state into an effective part of that infallible guidance system that we've all been given. You can also download the actual tool itself, absolutely free. It's a PDF file. Click on it, print it off, copy it, use it as often as you'd like. And you can download a whole host of audio files of shows like this one where people have been stepped through that process, so those audio files of shows can serve as a tutorial. Alternately, you can call in the show at 563-999-3581 and ask to be stepped through a process or taught about the program. That's why we're here, to offer support. In our current format, it's 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. You can also go to your app store and type in the 3 words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll get access to a completely free and private app if you click on the glowing heart icon. And that app contains a copy of the Reality Management Worksheet, an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and a copy by Pam Grout. She titles Lesson 174, No More Comments from the Peanut Gallery. She quotes George Orwell as saying, reality exists in the human mind and nowhere else. Pam writes, the dude is but love and therefore so am I. Into the presence I would enter now, and to give and receive are synonyms. Pam writes, I'll give the ego this much, even though it's a whiny know-it-all. It protects me from touching hot stoves and stepping in front of 3-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, it'll put a little question mark by your phone number, and I can announce you by your area code. We had the gift of Susan Bingham sending me some questions, so I will do what I can to discuss those a little bit. She writes that Gabor Mate mentions his, quote, default depression. And Susan writes about how at age 8, she decided that that was her position as well. But she also decided that life was exciting and beautiful. So here, what Susan is describing is she's having more than one core belief. And Diedrich Wolsack, Michael Rice, Guy Finley, basically anybody who studies the way we work as human beings would agree, we have more than one default position. We have more than one core belief. We have more than one 77 times 70 worksheet issue. We have more than one codependent dynamic. We have more than one power person dynamic. And so the issue is, how is one selected over another in a given situation? Because in some situations, if I'm like Susan Bingham, I feel that life is exciting and beautiful and that I am strong and resilient and creative. And in other situations, I feel like I'm helpless and hopeless and worthless and depressed. So the issue is, what determines which of my core beliefs gets activated? And in Diedrich Wolzak's terms, then whatever core belief is activated, that core belief chooses the emotion that I'm going to feel. And when that emotion is resonated, it adds strength and energy to the core belief, and I start to act in ways that will provide evidence to my mind that my core belief is true. My core belief that I'm guilty, that I'm unlovable, that I'm whatever. Or my core belief that life is exciting and beautiful and I'm strong and resilient and creative. One of the key factors that is often missed in the discussion about this, that I have used as a primary tool over the years, is it's the interpretation I place on the events that arise in my life that is energetically or resonating the connection with my core belief. So if I change the filter, if I change the interpretation, if I choose again, as Course in Miracles asks me to, then I'm going to resonate a different response within me. I have all of these potential responses within me. Bruce Lipton talks about our first 7 years of life, we are basically in a state of hypnosis, and we just suck up all kinds of thoughts and images and memories and impressions and dynamics. And then they get played out. And then we live our lives by playing out those unconscious dynamics. Michael Rice recognizes something very similar, and that's why he has the tool, the 3 early memories of conflict. And he says, in the lecture about that tool, that most of us think that we're adults interacting with other adults and actuality in our lives day in and day out. But we don't realize that basically we are wounded children in adult bodies acting out the same dynamics, operating from the same unhealthy, unloving, false beliefs that we downloaded when we were 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 or 9 or 12 years old, and there was conflict that arose, and we did this download of energies and dynamics and beliefs, and now we're operating from that as our lives go on. So the dynamic that Susan's asking about in the first question, how can these core beliefs exist in me and be in opposition? That's as common as taking a breath for a human being. In the what you
oh my God, I just lost my whole train of thought. It was because I knew I didn't deserve to be treated in the way that I was being treated. Yet I was being treated that way. And I racked my brain trying to come up with a reason for it. And I mean,
when you were younger, you mean?
Yes, when I was younger. Like, what would cause, like, it's basically, it was like neglect by my mother and then abuse by some other family members. And there was really no love in the house at all, and there was no safety.
You look in the culture, and yet, somebody throws a rock at a fence and happens to hit a tree and knock a piece of fruit out of it, and they go, oh, throwing rocks is the way to get fruit. If you happen at some point to, seem to get what you wanted with anger, or maybe there was someone in your life who really functioned with anger and forced you into doing things, so you came to believe that, well, anger is the way to get what you want. It's the way to kill yourself, literally. Anger is not an emotion. Anger is a drug, and it destroys. This thing called Brahma. I mean, there's no...
From that perspective, then everything I do is going to be, as the Course in Miracles lessons are teaching us, as I give, I receive. So I give love, I get love back. If I give nurturance and support, I get nurturance and support back. if I'm doing it from a balanced state, it's serving everyone. It's not just serving the creation and maintenance of the image that I want to project. You know, in this work, the true selfless and kindness behaviors are not about image. They're about what's truly needed, what is truly loving, what is truly helpful. One of my favorite lines from the Mirror Theory book says, no loving gift is ever truly given if the giver is not respected in the process. So there are some thoughts on that. Number 4 is a biggie. Number 4, Susan writes, Michael Rice stops us from crying. I call error right here. We have the game show buzzer going off. Here's an interpretation from Susan Bingham. She interprets that when Michael Rice says breathe, that means stop crying. And we've talked about this before. So this is a wonderful example of how Susan's judgments and triggers and biases in this area are coming up again. I'm happy to repeat it and rehash it as often as we need to. When Michael or when I give someone the admonition to breathe and soften, it is nothing to do with stopping crying. Please, if you need to cry, keep crying. And as you cry, breathe. As you breathe and keep your breath open, you will experience more and more intensely the very emotions. And with that, demonstrate to yourself that you aren't going to be damaged by those emotions and you can survive them. And you keep the part of your energy system open and active that can help you start processing through those emotions. When you cry and you tighten and tense and hold your breath and cry in sobs that are constricted, not the open sobbing. The open sobbing is
saying, there must be something wrong with me. There must be something wrong with me. I mean, it became my mantra. But, you know, I saw so clearly this morning that when I started to believe that I abandoned myself and I was no longer there for myself. And was the real issue.
And that's the goal, right? That's the goal of this work, is to help us understand that whatever we didn't get from our adult,
the same voice, the same thoughts, you know, that I think the same with you, but it's so great to hear you articulate it all and just confirm and resonate. And with the truth, like you were saying earlier, that it was written a long time ago and some of the language was used differently, and so you're always speaking about how we use language and the meanings can change or sometimes deliberately are changed, and it's just beautiful to be in present time. Thank you.
Holding the space. Have you talked to
Michela?
How's she doing?
Yeah, she did call me to get the Avicin back to me, and we spoke briefly. She's pretty brief anyway on the phone, but she said it was really hard, and she was with him, and it's really hard sleeping, with him not next to her and things like that. She's really missing. Yeah.
Bless her heart.
And they had plans to travel. Yeah.
Does she still have the Avicin there?
I think it's on its way. She got my address, and I guess,
Because she's having trouble sleeping. Put her hands in it and lay down and go to sleep. I mean, it's. I was talking to someone yesterday who's a truck driver, and they are carrying theirs on the road with them, and it's really rough sleeping. And they had stopped somewhere, not realizing that it was the Avicin that was enhancing their sleep. And
is anger good? Is grief good? Etc. That I encourage people to try out what works for them. And I have been in intensives with Michael Rice where he encourages people to breathe as they let their emotions come up. And I've been in intensive situations both at his intensive center and when he's visited in Crystal Lake, where he has mentioned to people, you've cried about this already. You've cried a lot about this. Perhaps it's time to take another approach. So keep your breath open and ask, what would happen if I didn't cry about it? This is not to say that the experience of the emotion is bad or wrong. It's an acknowledgement that sometimes we get stuck. And not just stuck in the expression or experiencing of the emotion, but stuck in a false belief about what's driving the emotion and or what it means about us. And so if we can choose again, if we can be results-oriented and play around with it, where from a perspective where I'm completely willing to cry and feel my sadness or feel my anger or feel my grief, and use tools to make sense of it and process and move forward from this point, rather than hold my breath, lock this down, fight against feeling the anger or fight against feeling the grief, etc. And if it works for you to rage and to own your anger and want to use it as a weapon against people, feel free. I have never really experienced that to be a productive endeavor. And so when I'm experiencing that from people, I offer them support in trying something else that might be more beneficial. And if they want to continue to rage, I walk away giving them blessings and letting them rage, because it's not mine to control their rage. If somebody wants to identify with their grief or wallow in their grief, I might invite them to experience it and express it in a way that's more, that gives a different set of results for them. And if they choose to stay in it, I bless them on their way. It isn't, from my position, it isn't that any emotion is bad or wrong. And it's a little, it gets a little complex at times when you'll hear Dr. Michael Rice talk about how these energies don't belong in the human energy system. The only energy belongs in the human energy system is love. And I think his regulatory speech is a little bit off there, and so I encourage people to talk about how everything that's in creation is there for a reason. This energy system, this mind-body energy system we have, goes way beyond my ability with my conscious logical mind to comprehend it, how it functions, when it was made, how it was made, etc. So it makes really good sense to me to say there's this gift of a mind-body energy system that I'm experiencing, and it would be very useful for me to know what every part of it is and is for. And so I find the most benefit by using my negative emotional states, whether it's anger or fear or sadness or guilt or shame or hurt or condemnation, as a warning, as an alarm system to alert me to the fact that there's something off in the interpretation I've placed on my life event. There's something off the mark in my thinking. And so from that perspective, my anger has a place. It has a role to play. My inner emotional pain has a role to play. Just like the nerve sensors that would pick up the fact that, whatever object I'm touching is too hot that it's going to do damage to my skin, and so it makes me, pull my hand back. So from that perspective, the emotions, they all belong in the energy system, and they all have a useful role to play. If I have misidentified the usefulness or the role that this energy has in my system, I'm not going to get optimal results. I'm going to be, using the wrong tool for the job. And sometimes when I use the wrong tool for the job, it takes a lot longer to get the job accomplished. Sometimes it demolishes the job and doesn't let me accomplish it at all. And that's how I would look at the experience of an expression of emotions that many would call negative emotions. There's also a question here. Did I mention that Krishnamurti has a 6-step process? The answer to that would be no. Krishnamurti has a very simple process, and that is observe and question and observe and question and observe and question. And he talks at great extent about how every thought, every belief, every structure of thought is a trap. It's the old, it's the dead, it's the past that I'm bringing from the past and trying to put it on the moment. And the thing that leads to a better life is to be awake and aware and questioning in the moment. I think it's Byron Katie that says, the I don't know mind. In the Way of Mastery, it talks about Yeshua did not enter a situation knowing what it was. He constantly observed. He didn't know what anything was or was for. He didn't know what his brother or sister needed in any moment. He was asking to be shown. He was keeping his mind open and in the questioning and observing state rather than coming at things from a belief that he knew or understood what was happening. He was awake and aware and asking to be taught in each moment. And that would be the Krishnamurti approach. More so than any other writer or teacher I've ever encountered. And then, since nobody has a hand up, I will just say about meditation that ways to meditate, how to meditate. I think you would need to define meditation for that to be a useful question. I think one of the biggest trip-ups or traps for us in the Western world when we think about or talk about meditation is that we attach a desired outcome to an individual meditation or the process of meditation. And that is a trap because I'm trying to force something. It's like trying to force yourself to go to sleep when you're not tired. It's, sleep is something that comes as a natural process when the organism is fatigued. And if you have ever tried this, and most people experience the futility of inwardly yelling at themselves, get to sleep, doggone it, I have to get up early in the morning to catch that flight or to get to work, and if I don't get to sleep soon, I'm not going to get enough rest. And so when we try to force something that's a natural process, it doesn't work so well. And the same is with meditation. The idea of, I did for years, I read, I studied, I paid money to have people teach me how to meditate, and they all had these tricks of the mind, and they were all designed in one way or another to train me to train my mind. And I experienced frustration and failure and more frustration at every turn. And then I finally read, I believe it was in a Ram Dass book, that he suggested that if you make an appointment with yourself that you're going to meditate for the next half an hour, and let's say you're going to start meditating at noon, then you do these things. You make an appointment with yourself for 2 o'clock, and at 2 o'clock, if anything comes up in the next half hour of meditation that needs an action from you or it needs you to be emotional about it, you'll do that at 2 o'clock. But for the next half hour, beginning at noon, if that's when you're starting your meditation, he said, any thought that comes up is perfectly okay, and I'm going to refuse to pour any emotional energy into it. And then I get in a comfortable place. I make sure I'm not going to be distracted for the half an hour. I sit or lie down comfortably, and I gently shift the focus of my attention throughout the next 20 minutes between focusing on my breath, occasionally doing a mental inventory of whatever I'm feeling in my body from the top of my head down to my toes, and watching whatever thoughts come into my awareness. If I'm letting them, visualizing them coming into my awareness from the left side, present themselves, and then they float off to the right side. Sometimes I form a cartoon bubble in my head and let them float off in a cartoon bubble. And then I just notice, okay, well, I wonder what thought's going to come next. It might be the same thought that shows up for 20 minutes. But I've already made the commitment that I'm not going to pour mental, emotional energy into it. I'm just going to watch it. I'm not going to question it. I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to get emotional about it. I'm not going to act on it. If it's something that needs me to act on it, I'll do it at 2 o'clock. I've already made that commitment. And if I sit in that chair or lie in that position comfortably for 20 minutes, as I decided that that was what I would do, and I gently shift the focus of my attention back and forth through these three categories, watching my breath, watching my thoughts, and occasionally doing a mental inventory, I can say at the end of 20 minutes, I succeeded in what I set out to do. You could say I had a successful meditation, if that's the word you want to use for it. But any thought is okay. This is a process of learning to watch, to catch judgment and release it, to catch emotional tension and release it, to simply observe, to be with and watch my thoughts, and notice, willingly notice my physical reactions, tightness or tension in the body, cold feelings, numb sensations, tinglings, hot, light, heavy, absence of sensation. I can't really feel my arm. That's interesting. If I do that for 20 minutes and gently shift the focus of my attention between my thoughts, my physical sensations, and the breath, then I have succeeded. And that is, to this day, one of the more useful processes, some would call meditations, that I've ever engaged. So, our caller number is 563-999-3581. I think I have addressed most of the questions or comments from Susan. How does that stir stuff up for you? Or what comments would you have if she was asking you the same questions? Susan, welcome.
Hi, thanks a lot, Dr. Tim. Very helpful. The meditation one, very helpful. I realized I've been wanting to meditate to get away from stress at home and wanting to use it as an escape route. To have no expectations and just open a period of time is a great idea. I think I can do that. Also, the business of having a story. I know that everybody has a story, and I thought it was fascinating that Gabor Mate said, you can experience trauma from what might appear to be the smallest, most innocuous thing, but your interpretation of it, of the event or relationship or whatever, can be for you traumatic. And where that comes from is another discussion. But one thing that my son has been doing has been going over and over some early childhood things and the situations that he has run into at various hospitals that he has worked at during his career. And talk about a why is this happening to me again? And that isn't to blame him in any way, but the medical scene, from what I understand, not only from him, but from many other doctors, is that it's really out of control. It's become very politicized. It's become a driver to raise money for itself. And patient care is often falling behind. And the doctors are picking up the slack. He'll tell me, for instance, a story about how he had 2 operations scheduled at once. And they were both simple enough that he could actually be running from one operating room to another, or another time where he had no assistant. No one had prepared the instruments or set up the room, so he had to scrub everything and sterilize things and bring them in. And he said this is getting more and more common as doctors are burning out and other medical people are burning out, especially during COVID when everything became much more intense. So he's telling me all this, and I'm listening to this, but it doesn't seem to move off. The story keeps being the thing, and so he is declaring his victimhood over and over. And, you know, it's complicated for me because I'm his mother, so I suggest things. I offer to do. In fact, the other day we attempted a worksheet, but he stopped me halfway through and said, my brain fog is so awful and my anxiety is so high. I think I told you this. I can't focus on this. So I said, let's do a mind shifter then. And I thought of a good one, and he thought it was very good. And he filled in half a page of refutations, but then stopped and said, I can't do this anymore either. So we just walked. We went walking. We were waiting for my grandson to get out of a baseball coaching thing, and we were far away from home. So we were walking around a parking lot, around and around and around. He was just like this walking ball of anxiety. And so my work, of course, is to be okay with all that, to allow that, to do my own work, and I'm doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. But I do listen to lots of things and try to understand things, and maybe that's going into my head too much, but I'm getting back now to the story. When do you stop a story? When is it time to say no more story? And that's what I thought Michael was doing when he said, no crying now. You've done like that. You've done enough crying. Crying is part of the story, or raging is part of the story. Let's get into the forgiveness, look at the goal, and so forth. You explained that well, so that's okay. But yeah, if you've had a client or two, I've had many actually, who keep telling the story. And it seems that I feel free to interrupt the story and get to work, but with my son it's been quite different, and maybe that's just because he's my son. I don't know.
Well, so how would you interrupt it if it was a client?
I would say, I hear you, and that must have been extremely painful. Let's get our thoughts organized. Let's pull out this worksheet or tool and start from the top and narrow down. For instance, pick one emotion. You're angry, you're mad, you're frustrated, disappointed.
So I would suggest a different approach.
Okay.
I would suggest asking them if they want to feel better.
Oh boy. Okay. Good. Okay.
When you come at this and you tell someone, you've cried enough about this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who says?
Well, I don't say that. You were saying that was my experience.
Who am I to know? Who am I to know that someone has cried enough? okay, enough of your story. Well, who am I to know they've told their story enough? So I would recommend asking them, are they interested in changing something? Are they ready to heal or feel differently? And then approach my response from their position. And there are times when we've had this discussion. There's a radio show from a number of years ago now where I think it was Julie Haverstick called and was asking for input from Michelle and from me about, I think the pattern for her was that she was getting a lot of frustration coming up because it was her experience that she was working harder than the people she was working with. And perhaps even for some of them, she wasn't charging them money. So she was, really working on doing worksheets with them and coming up with mind shifters and really putting a lot of Julie's mental energy in trying to help these people change. And then between sessions, they weren't doing anything.
Yeah.
And so she asked about, what do you do? Have you had that, and what happens? And I discussed this kind of thing and asking people, are you interested in changing? And I talked about how it gets more and more rare the longer I've been in practice, but I have actually, in quotes, fired, close quotes, people, patients, because our goals weren't aligned.
Right.
And sometimes I fire them because they're being abusive to a family member in front of me, and no matter how much I coach them, they won't stop. And sometimes I fire them because I don't want to participate in the charade of them doing therapy when they're not actually doing any of the work in therapy. I don't want to be helping them kid themselves into thinking that they're going to get better and that lives are going to move forward just because they come to a session with me once a week if they're not doing anything during the meeting and between the meeting to actually change their life for the better.
Yeah. Okay. That's very good. Yes, I've had that experience too with a married couple. One of them wanted to be in therapy and the other one didn't want the marriage to work. And we stopped working because one of them was in there in order to prove that the marriage can't work. And that was pretty painful to see. Yeah.
And then with family members, at times this has come up, and I have had to say to them, okay, I hear what you're saying. It sounds like a really difficult situation, and you've talked about this a lot, and if you'd like to try and change something, I'll be happy to suggest some things. But if not, I'm finding it too difficult because I care so much for you to sit here and listen to this. I'm going to leave, right?
Oh, boy, okay.
Unless we shift the topic to something that is more neutral or pleasant in our lives, or actually give you, stepping into the tools that might help you, I'm going to say I've had enough. It's too painful for me because I'm starting to feel frustrated or angry or sad, and I have work I'm going to have to do around that. And so I'm going to go do that work, and I'll leave you to, whatever you're doing. I've done that with family members before. Most notably, my mother at times. And, most of the time she says, okay, I'll shift the focus, and we'll either then sit around and talk about how much good there is going on in her life and or the strength and resources of the people that she's talking about that she's so worried about, and then she ends up feeling better, or we actually help her step through a tool. And rarely she's been so, focused on the negative. I think there was once or twice in the course of the last 20-some years since my dad died, that I would say, okay, I'm going to go. I'll give you a call in a bit and see if you want to shift focus or whatever. But I would begin by asking them, do you want to get better? Would you like a suggestion? Mm-hmm. And if I'm not the therapist and they just want to sit and kvetch and vent, if I have the energy, if it's that kind of a relationship, and I know it's not going to trigger my upset, I'll sit and let them vent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good.
If I ask them, do you want a suggestion? Are you willing to change? And they say yes, then I'll present some tools.
Good.
But I don't think it's for me to decide when somebody chooses to get healthy.
Good.
Comments, thoughts, other than just good?
Well, I can do those things. I could do both of those things. Yeah, I've even wondered if my son presents the worst side of things to me. I'm not sure this is true. This is a question. Because I will listen. Then he would present to others. Like he went and visited a friend yesterday, and I wish I could have been a fly on the wall to see how he presents his situation to other people. But I can't know that. In other words, I've wondered if we're in a kind of a codependent thing. I know I am very codependently connected with him.
Right. If you've wondered about it, it's probably true.
Yeah, my well-being has been very tied up in his well-being, and that's where my focus has been. And I've done, considering what's going on, I think the tools have been helping tremendously, but I'm not out of the woods by any means.
Well, and it's more accurate to say, rather than say my well-being is tied up in his well-being, it's more accurate to say that my belief is that my well-being is tied up with his well-being.
Good. Correction noted.
Right? If I believe I can't be happy unless X, Y, or Z person, my son, my daughter, my coworker is happy. If I believe I can't be happy or I don't deserve to have a good life unless this other family member, son, daughter, husband, wife, child, etc., has a good life, then that's what's going to drive my perception, is that belief. It's not necessarily true, but it drives my experience.
Right.
And that's Michael's definition of a codependent relationship. Every time I come to believe that someone or something else has to change in order for me to be happy the way the mirror theory says it is, then in that moment, the key to happiness is lost. Whenever I believe anyone outside of me needs to change in order for me to be happy, the key to happiness is lost. It's a completely false belief, and it will generate a completely powerful illusion. We call it perception. And I will absolutely believe that my reality is true. As Michael says in the worksheet, that my fear and hostility-based story, that my reality is true. But it doesn't matter how much I believe something that's false. It doesn't automatically make it true. It doesn't matter how long I believe it. It doesn't change the nature of the thing.
Right. And on the right side of his worksheet, we also tell ourselves or intend not to make up another story to reinstate the whole mess. And that is a very easy thing to do, too. Clean one thing up, and it's like whack-a-mole. The other one pops up.
Right. It's what we've been trained to do. It's like an automatic decision process that's been programmed into our conscious mind. But, for example, it doesn't matter how many people believe that the Earth is flat. It's not changing the physical nature of the Earth.
Right.
And, another one that I've used quite often is, an excuse doesn't have to be valid in order for me to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There doesn't have to be any validity to an excuse whatsoever in order for me to use it.
Mm.
There doesn't have to be any external validity to a reality I create in order for me to live my life from it. It's a hallucination.
So true. Yeah. I don't know if I should even say this. Remember Pam Grout? She lost a daughter. And I don't think there were psychological problems. I think she just had an aneurysm or some freak thing, and at a very young age she died. And Pam has made a wonderful life for herself despite that loss, and feels very much connected to her daughter. I have often thought, Jonathan speaks about not wanting to be alive, and I have thought, horrible as it would be if he weren't, it would be a relief, because then he wouldn't be in any more pain. Therefore, no one else around him would be in any pain either, at least over that. And
there's
like
codependent thinking.
Boy, it sure is.
There's codependent thinking. Yep. Here's the buzzer's going off again, the game show buzzer. Codependent thinking at its finest, right there. Yep. If he would just not be in pain, then the rest of us wouldn't be in pain. That is an error in thinking of a particular format that Dr. Michael Rice calls codependence.
Yeah.
It's an error no matter what you call it.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, people can be miserable even when everyone in their family is healthy and happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd probably find out I could be. If everybody was happy, I'd find something else to not be happy about. That's probably true. Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's an inside job. It's a decision. There's a wonderful piece of writing from the column Dear Sugar titled The Obliterated Place. And this is a father who's lost a son. He's a 58-year-old man. And 4 years earlier, a drunk driver killed his 20-some-year-old son. And he's so grief-stricken he can't really get his thoughts together. So he writes in bullet points in a list. And then Dear Sugar answers. He writes in 22 points, and she answers in, I think it's 30.
Mm-hmm.
30 points of the list. And it is well worth reading. I'm not sure we have quite enough time to get through it, but the issue is we have a life, and it's a choice about what we do with that life. And it's a struggle, especially in the ways our culture trains us to think about things and think about what creates our grief, etc. And the recommendation is, bottom line, pretty similar to what you just mentioned with Pam Grout. Make a life that's beautiful with whatever you're given, make a life that your son or daughter or whoever died that you would like to have here, that they would be happy for you to have.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, we've gone around this pony track before, and my thought is, but then I'm abandoning them. I have to take care of them. Otherwise, I'm being abandoned. For me to be joyful and at peace, even if my son is struggling.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Mm.
That's just the beginning. That's the tip of the iceberg, but I would certainly begin there. When you have this false belief that if you're happy, you would be abandoning the people you love. Boy, there's a gold mine of connected associations in there. Michael would call them, word links, etc., mind links, and they're not true, and they're counterproductive. And the more you get clear about them, the more you can choose again. You can choose differently.
Right. Yeah.
But one of the things I tell people is, if you do what is truly good for you, it is not possible for it to be bad for anybody else, especially anybody who cares about you and loves you.
It's good to remember, too.
It's just not possible that if you do something that's truly good for you, that it's bad for anybody, especially somebody who cares about you and has your best interest at heart. And so I would strongly encourage you to do that mind shifter or worksheets around the fear or sadness or guilt that comes up when you think it would be a bad thing for you to be happy when your son is not happy, when your son is in pain.
That's so true, and I'll do it. Thank you, Dr. Kitten. You've run out of time.
Okay. Well, blessings. Thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it, and the list of questions that you sent in email. I will mute you and look forward to the next time we chat. I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Welcome, Jeannie Rice. I'd love to welcome Jeannie Rice, but her microphone isn't on. I'm taking a risk and turning on your microphone.
Oh. I was sitting
Don't
there
make any embarrassing
noises.
Your microphone is on.
I'm actually glad that it was not on the switchboard, because I reached down to turn my phone off of mute and saw it was already unmuted. And I've been sitting here typing away what you all have been talking about. And so I'm glad I was actually muted on the switchboard, or you'd been hearing clunk, 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 clunk. So, oh, well.
All right. Well, have a wonderful show.
Awesome. And I looked up that Dear Sugar. I looked up that Dear Sugar, the article on the obliterated place, and I'm going to put a link to it in the notes for today, too. So, awesome.
Well, thank you very much. All right. Take care.
Thank you. All right, you too. Bye.